Hello YouTube and welcome to the channel. Now then, today's video is going to be an unboxing and teardown of this. It's Wltoys 104001, which is their 10th scale or new 10th scale buggy. Now we're not going to do a run video of this because it's been given to me by a chap who's asked me to just go through it, make sure everything's greased, etc. So I thought while I was doing that, I may as well make a video for you guys because I'm also interested in how much commonality there is between this and something like the Wltoys 144001. So we'll unbox it and have a good poke around, see what's what with it. Now he has actually opened the box to check whether the contents are all there, so and they were. So normally on the videos I would unbox things and you would see if there's anything missing, anything damaged, you'd see it. But anyway, let's find out what we actually get in the box. By the way, I think here in the UK, I think he paid 133 quid for this. It comes with 3 batteries. You got it from Banggood. That's about $184 for our American brethren. Anyway, let's get into it, see what we get. Now it's ready to run obviously, and it's 4-wheel drive, but in the box we get what looks like a parts book, instruction manual, rear wing, a little battery charger. That's supplied with virtually every Wltoys vehicle, I think, and one of these little plastic, they really are absolutely useless, these things. One of the little plastic nut wheel braces, nut removers, rubbish. Some spares, and that's about it for that. He did have 3 batteries, oh god. So we've got 2 LiPos here. They're actually 220 milliamp hour capacity, sorry, 2200 milliamp hour capacity. There should be 3 of them. Let's extract the buggy. I think first thing you notice about it is how some weight in it, I tell you. So there's the buggy, and there's the transmitter. Now then, let's just discard the package in a minute. Have a quick look at this. It looks pretty standard Wltoys fare. I mean, this transmitter is supplied with, as far as I know, most of the Wltoys models, which is a good thing because I quite like this transmitter. It's quite good. Anyway, let's get rid of that crap. Okay, there we go, the beast itself. And like I say, the first thing you notice about it is the weight. There's a good weight to it, and I can see lots of different alloy parts and metal parts on it. Initially, there doesn't look much, if anything at all, like there would be any common parts with the 144001, etc. But anyway, let's remove the body. Well, there's the other battery. Let's just remove that. Get that out of the way. Now then. No, there doesn't. Actually, well, the motor looks, I don't know if that's the same 550 motor that's in the 1440s or on the 1240, 18/19, etc. Could be, except with the addition of a cooling fan. It does look very similar, I must admit. That servo there is much bigger. That actually looks like the servo that you'd find in a 12429, but no, first glance it doesn't look as though there's much alike. Okay, even the ESC stroke receiver's got a little fan on it. Okay, I'll take some bits off and we'll have a look. Now that we've taken the wheels and tyres off, we can actually see the difference between the 104001 and the 144001. I mean, this tyre's actually off a 1240/18, I believe, but you can see the difference in size there. I mean, as you expect, it's 10th scale, so I mean, there's even more of a difference between the rears. Thickness wise, virtually almost twice as thick, but you'd expect that it's a 10th scale buggy. Now apart from the transmitter, The only other major difference, sorry, the only other major similarity I can see is actually the batteries that it takes and the battery holder and the strap. Everything else on the Buggy looks completely different. I mean, I know it uses the same motor, but obviously without this great big radiator. So I'm wondering, because the ESC's got a little fan on it as well. And I'm wondering, do they have some cooling issues? That's why they've got a great big radiator on it as well. Because you don't get that, obviously, on the 44001 or the 124019. You don't get that radiator. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll start taking bits and pieces apart and see what we actually get. I've removed all 4 shocks and these seem pretty well screwed together. They're adjustable and oil filled, as you'd expect. And they look like 144001 shocks on steroids. Much thicker, much larger. I'm not a massive fan of these plastic tops here because I think a lot of the time if you hit them hard enough you can get that thing to snap off. But they seem pretty well screwed together, nice and plush. And they're not leaking, none of them are leaking, so they're still oil tight even though they've been transported with oil in them. I have noticed one thing while I've been having a quick look around. The front drive shafts are much thicker than the rear for some reason, don't know why that should be. But anyway, I'll carry on tearing it down. I might take the motor and the central drive shaft assembly apart and see what's involved in that. Now then, I've removed the cover from the central reduction gear. That retaining ring that holds it on was a pig to get off because it was Loctited on. Anyway, just look at the size of that reduction gear. Solid steel reduction gear there with a little steel pinion gear on the end of the motor. It runs on 2 ball races either side. I don't know if this mount looks familiar, but I'll continue taking it off and see if it is. Well, that's the motor and central reduction gear off. It's quite a complicated piece of kit, this is. And this actual reduction gear, if I can pull it off there, is absolutely massive, a solid piece of metal. It's held on by 2 aluminium brackets where the bearings sit, and the other bracketry is connected to the motor like so. I thought this bottom bracket on the motor was going to be very similar to the 44001, but it's nothing like. It's completely different. It mounts completely different. What I'm going to do next is let's have a look at one of these diffs, see what's involved inside there. Now, before we move on to the diffs, I just thought I'd mention the fact that, as per usual with Wltoys, the motor mounts etc are Loctited on, so there can be a pig to get off, but a sharp tap with a screwdriver just to break the seal on the adhesive is enough to make the job a damn sight easier. Now that we're looking at the power transmission side of things, here's a few interesting observations. The rear drive cups are absolutely huge compared to the preceding smaller buggies, and the bearings which they sit on are correspondingly much larger. I mean, the 144001 etc, the bearings that the drive cups etc run in are minute. These are huge, absolutely huge. Interestingly as well, the rear dog bones, strangely enough, are roughly the same thickness as the ones for the 144001, which I find very strange. Might not be as odd as I think though, because if it's using the same 550 motor, obviously the power must be similar. But there's an awful lot of weight to move around in this truck, stroke buggy, so I just find it odd that the front drive shafts are massive, but the rear ones are virtually the same as the smaller 14 and 12th scale buggies. Also, obviously the shock towers are correspondingly larger, but the material that they're, or the thickness of the material that they're stamped out of, is virtually identical to the much smaller 12 and 144001. So, I mean, these would have to support a lot more weight in an accident. So, how long they'll last before they bend, I don't know, but the material thickness is virtually the same. One criticism I am going to level at this, and I have noticed, is also the lack of lubricant on anything. I mean, this is the rear diff. Obviously, there's no grease between that pinion gear there and the ring gear on the diff whatsoever. It is completely dry. So if you're going to buy one of these, first thing I do, like this gentleman's letting me do, is make sure everything's lubricated correctly. Because it's virtually the same story on this reduction gear as well. There's virtually no lubrication on any of these parts whatsoever. Now that we've split the diff cover, we get access to the diff inside. I'm pleased to report that obviously, as you'd expect, all the little gears inside are metal. Unfortunately, there's not a great deal in the way of grease in there, so if you're buying one of these buggies, I would strongly recommend the first thing you do is strip it and grease everything up. There is a nice sort of rubber gasket on the inside though of this ring, which should help keep dirt and crap out. The bearings, unfortunately, that the diff runs on don't feel very nice quality at all. There's quite a lot of play in them, unfortunately, so how long they will actually last I don't know, but the diff itself is quite a large affair. Now then, one area that they have beefed up is these Wishbone retaining brackets. Unlike the shock towers and the drive shafts at the rear, these, compared with the 12 scale and the 14th scale buggies, are virtually twice as thick. So these, compared to the 144001, are quite beefy. So they've actually spent the money there on these brackets, but not actually on the shock towers. So that these must be fairly rigid and hopefully won't break as often. But that's the rear disassembled. Let's have a go and see what is involved with the front. Well, here's the front diff removed, and there's virtually no difference between this and the rear, apart from the front has a much shorter drive shaft. Again, there's absolutely no lubricant in here. I'm not sure whether there's supposed to be. I would have thought so, but there's absolutely no lubricant in here whatsoever. Now, I promised I'd show you the front drive shafts compared to the rear. Well, these are the rear dog bones, and you can see there's an absolutely huge, they must be twice as thick. The front drive shafts are almost twice as thick as the rears, which I find very strange. These look as though you could run these on your car. They're massive, but yeah, interestingly enough, very thin ones at the rear, and that's a bit strange. Now, while I've got all the components off the chassis, I have noticed that the thickness of this 104001 chassis, the thickness of the plate itself, you probably can't tell on camera, is virtually identical, or as far as I can tell, identical to the 144001 chassis. So people have been complaining that the 10th scale buggy, the chassis isn't particularly rigid, and they're probably onto something there, because it's virtually twice the length of its smaller sibling, and the same thickness. So yeah, it's not a particularly thick chassis really. Now, as I mentioned to you before, the steering servo itself is much larger than its smaller siblings. I mean, probably by a factor of 3, to be honest, because the one on the 144001 is tiny. Also, the ESC is different as well. It's not just a 144001 ESC stroke receiver with a fan on top. It does look like a completely different unit. Like I say, the addition of a cooling fan and a cooling fan on the motor, possibly overheating issues, possibly. Well, that's basically a complete teardown of a Wltoys 104001. All that's left for me to do now is obviously put it back together, put some grease in various places. What did we think of the quality? Well, the quality is pretty standard Wltoys. Certain areas it looked as though they'd made a real effort to beef things up, but strangely in others, I think the metal in certain areas is way too thin. Does it represent good value for money? Well, I believe it does actually, because this version came with 3 batteries and it was 133 quid. Well, I can't remember what I said, 180 odd dollars. Well, the batteries have got to be worth 20 quid a piece. So from a value point of view, I say for a 1/10 scale buggy, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much on the money. Is it as good or better than its rivals? That I don't know. Like I say, in certain areas I think they've skimped a little bit, and these quality issues might rear their head later on down the road. But for a value, you know, looking at the parts involved from a value point of view, it's pretty much on the money. As ever, if you've enjoyed the video and you found it of some use and interest, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you're feeling that way inclined, hit that subscribe button for more very similar future content. Thanks for watching, guys. Thank you.